In the mountains of feudal Japan, a young warrior named Takeshi approached his Zen master with frustration burning in his eyes. "Sensei," he said, "I have trained my body for years. My sword strikes are perfect. My stance is flawless. Yet when I face a true opponent, my mind freezes. I overthink every move, I hesitate. How can I become truly ready for battle?" The master smiled and asked him a simple question. "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" Takeshi stood there, confused. He tried to answer logically. He attempted to explain. He even demonstrated by moving one hand through the air. But the master simply shook his head and walked away. For months, Takeshi wrestled with this question. He analyzed it from every angle. He debated it with other students. He researched ancient texts searching for the answer. Yet the more he tried to solve it with his thinking mind, the more trapped he became. Then one morning, while sitting in meditation, something shifted. The question itself dissolved. His constant mental chatter stopped. And in that moment of pure silence, Takeshi understood. The koan had not been a puzzle to solve. It had been a sword to cut through the prison of his own thinking. This practice reveals something the samurai understood centuries ago. The greatest enemy in battle is not the opponent before you. It is the overthinking mind that clouds your clarity, delays your action, and steals your natural instinct. A koan is a little healing story, a conversation, an image, a fragment of a song used for religious training in the Zen Buddhist tradition. But calling it simply a riddle misses the deeper purpose. The main goal of koan practice in Zen is to achieve kensho, to see or observe one's Buddha nature. For the samurai, this meant accessing a state of mind where action flows without the interference of doubt, fear, or hesitation. Think about your own mind right now. How often does it spin in circles, analyzing the same problem repeatedly without reaching clarity? How many times have you known what to do but overthought yourself into paralysis? How frequently does your inner dialogue argue with itself, creating confusion where there should be decisive action? This is the modern battle we all face. We live in an age of infinite information but finite wisdom. We have access to every answer yet struggle with the simplest questions. We plan endlessly but act hesitantly. The samurai recognized this problem centuries ago and developed a precise tool to cut through it: the koan. Koans are paradoxical to the thinking mind and agitate the discriminating thinking mind in general. Used to provoke the great doubt and test a student's understanding of Dharma. This is not about making you confused for confusion's sake. It is about exposing how your mind creates its own prison through constant analysis and judgment. Consider how this applies to your daily challenges. You face a difficult decision at work. Your thinking mind immediately splits into multiple voices. One voice says take the risk. Another says play it safe. A third voice questions whether you even understand the situation correctly. A fourth analyzes what others might think. Soon you are not making a decision, you are hosting an internal debate that drains your energy and delays your action. The samurai could not afford this luxury. When your mind is calm, you can see clearly, act quickly, and stay aware of everything happening around you. In the space between sensing danger and responding to it, there was no room for committee meetings in the mind. They needed to train themselves to bypass the thinking process and access direct knowing. This is where koan practice becomes revolutionary. Koans are intentionally puzzling or paradoxical statements, questions, or short dialogues used in Zen practice to bypass logical reasoning and trigger direct insight. When you give your analytical mind a problem it cannot solve through logic, something remarkable happens. First, the mind tries harder. It searches for patterns. It attempts different approaches. It consults its memory bank of previous solutions. This is the exhausting phase that most people experience when they first encounter a koan. You feel like you are supposed to find the answer, so you keep pushing. But here is the insight the samurai masters understood. The effort itself is the obstacle. You're trying to solve the koan is exactly what prevents you from understanding it. Imagine trying to see the bottom of a pond while constantly stirring the water with a stick. Your stirring is what creates the cloudiness. The moment you stop, the sediment settles and clarity emerges naturally. This is not a metaphor. This is literally what happens in your mind during koan practice. One does the same thing over and over, with no thought to accomplishing a goal. At first, this seems like wasted effort. You sit with a question that has no logical answer. You repeat it during meditation. You carry it with you throughout your day, and nothing seems to happen. Then, often when you least expect it, something shifts. Not because you found the answer, but because you stopped looking for one. Your mind, exhausted from trying to solve the unsolvable, finally surrenders its need to control and understand everything. In that moment of surrender, a different kind of knowing emerges. The samurai called this Mushin, the state of no mind. Mushin, translated as no mind, describes a state where thoughts do not hinder instinctive responses. Swordsmen considered this mental clarity as crucial as blade sharpness. This is not emptiness in the sense of having nothing in your head. It is freedom from the constant mental commentary that normally drowns out your intuitive wisdom. Think of a professional athlete in the zone. They are not thinking about technique. They are not analyzing their movements. They are not worried about the outcome. They simply act, and their action is perfect because it flows from a place deeper than thought. This is what Koan practice trains you to access on demand. Let me be clear about what this practice is not. It is not about becoming good at answering Zen riddles. It is not about collecting spiritual experiences to impress others. It is not about achieving some mystical state you can brag about later. Koans don't really explain things. Instead, they show you something by opening a gate. You walk through and you take the ride. The practice works by breaking your addiction to explanation and understanding. We have been trained since childhood to believe that knowing the right answer is success. School rewarded you for having answers. Work promotes you for solving problems. Society values people who can explain things clearly, but the deepest truths cannot be explained. They can only be experienced directly. Love cannot be fully explained to someone who has never felt it. Beauty cannot be adequately described to someone who has never seen it. And the clarity of mind the samurai cultivated cannot be understood through explanation. It must be tasted directly. This is why teachers test students for their ability to stay with a paradox without falling into the trap of analyzing it intellectually, to go beyond the duality in the paradox and look at the same paradox from the viewpoint of non-dual zeroness. In practical terms, how does this ancient practice apply to your modern life? You do not need to become a Zen monk or live in a monastery to benefit from Koan practice. You simply need to understand the principle and apply it consistently. Start by choosing a single koan to work with. The most famous is mu. Does a dog have Buddha nature? The master answers mu, which can mean nothing or no or beyond yes and no. Do not try to figure out what this means. Instead, make it your companion. When you sit in meditation, repeat mu with each exhale. When your mind wanders into planning or worrying, return to mu. When you feel overwhelmed by options and analysis, ask yourself, what is mu in this situation? The question is not meant to be answered. It is meant to interrupt your habitual thinking patterns. Each time you return to the koan instead of following your thoughts, you are building a new mental muscle. The muscle of being able to let go of thinking when thinking is not helpful. Over time, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice the difference between useful thinking and useless mental spinning. You start to catch yourself earlier in the cycle of overthinking. You develop the ability to drop into clarity and presence more quickly when situations demand decisive action. This is exactly what the samurai needed and what you need today. The battles you face may not involve swords, but they require the same mental clarity. When you must make a difficult decision quickly, you need access to knowing beyond analysis. When you face a challenging conversation, you need to respond from wisdom rather than reacting from fear. When you encounter unexpected obstacles, you need mental flexibility rather than rigid thinking. Koan practice trains all of these abilities simultaneously. But I must warn you about the trap that catches most beginners. You will be tempted to think you have figured out the koan. Your clever mind will offer you an explanation that feels satisfying. You will want to believe you have solved it and can move on. This is the exact moment when the real practice begins. After the initial insight, further practice is necessary to deepen the insight and learn to integrate it in daily life. Understanding a koan intellectually is like reading a book about swimming. It gives you information, but it does not make you a swimmer. True mastery comes from years of returning to the same question, each time discovering new layers you had not seen before. The samurai spent decades with their koans, not because they were slow learners, but because they understood that the practice itself was transforming their minds at a level deeper than conscious understanding. Each time they returned to the question, they were carving new neural pathways. They were training their awareness to function in ways that bypassed the limitations of linear thinking. They were becoming comfortable with not knowing, which paradoxically made them more effective at navigating uncertainty. In your life right now, identify the areas where overthinking sabotages you. Perhaps it is in your relationships where you analyze every word instead of simply connecting with the person. Perhaps it is in your work where you endlessly plan instead of taking action. Perhaps it is in your personal growth where you read endless books about change instead of actually changing. Choose one koan to work with for the next month, not to solve it, but to let it work on you. Carry it with you like a master swordsman carries his blade. Let it cut through your mental clutter every time you notice yourself spinning in thought. The beautiful thing about this practice is that you cannot do it wrong. Even your frustration with the koan is part of the training. Even your certainty that you have figured it out is part of the process. Even your boredom with repeating the same question is teaching you something valuable. The koan is a mirror showing you how your mind operates. The more clearly you see your mental patterns, the more choice you have about whether to follow them. And choice is where true freedom lives. The samurai understood something that modern psychology is only now confirming through research. Your thoughts are not facts. Your mental analysis is not always helpful. Your need to understand everything is often what prevents you from seeing clearly. The most important battle is to overcome yourself. This is not about defeating yourself or hating your mind. It is about training your awareness to be stronger than your thoughts. Imagine having the ability to quiet your mental noise whenever you choose. Imagine making decisions from a place of clarity rather than confusion. Imagine responding to challenges with calm presence rather than reactive thinking. This is not a fantasy. This is what koan practice develops when approached with sincerity and patience. The question is not whether this path leads to greater mental clarity, because centuries of warriors have proven that it does. The only question is whether you will pick up this ancient tool and use it in your own life. The riddle that seemed meaningless at first becomes the key that unlocks a new way of being. The question that frustrated you becomes the doorway to peace. The practice that seemed pointless becomes the foundation of unshakable presence. This is the gift the samurai left for us, not their fighting techniques, but their method for sharpening the mind until it cuts through illusion as cleanly as their swords cut through silk. Your mind is already sharp. The practice simply removes the rust of overthinking that dulls its edge. Begin today, choose your koan, sit with your question. Let it frustrate you, confuse you, and eventually free you. The sound of one hand clapping awaits your discovery, not in finding the answer, but in transcending the need for one. Thank you for watching.